Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. The breaking news today is that the Russian Shahed 136 drone has ended up colliding with a Romanian ship inside of the Danube River near the port of Reni, and appears to have caused some serious damage to the ship, although no injury or death was sustained within the crew. There is actually a video clip here showing, or more so letting you hear the sound of the Shahed 136 flying in, and also the subsequent explosion near the Romanian ship. We can see the explosion right there, with the smoke rising into the sky. And as that smoke rises into the sky, a Romanian ship has suffered some moderate damage to its hull, and the crew has ended up surviving without any injuries. This is, of course, something that I don't even need to really say, is that is a very concerning escalation. The port of Reni is on the Danube River, and beyond the Reni area and going down the Danube River to the sea, you can see that the entire river is jointly shared in between Ukraine and Romania. It's largely a joint jurisdiction at this point in the river. And considering that a Russian drone has attacked a Romanian-flagged ship inside of the Danube River at this stretch of it, that is very concerning. That technically could be an invocation of Article 4 and Article 5 under the provisions laid out by Article 6. Article 6 lays out that maritime assets of a nation that is a member of NATO, that includes Romania, if they are attacked, that could invoke Article 4, which then, of course, would go and invoke Article 5. That is incredibly concerning into its own right, and this is the first time we've ever seen a Russian explosive or any kind of Russian attack whatsoever directly threaten the lives of NATO citizens. This hasn't ever been seen before. We've seen, of course, the Russians take down a drone in the Black Sea. We've also seen them harass multiple drones and multiple aircraft in the Black Sea that were a part of a military trying to conduct surveillance on the war, but we have never seen civil infrastructure like this ship or the port of Reni being hit that could possibly start to drag NATO countries like Romania into escalation like we're seeing right now. And that is incredibly serious, and this is also something that we've never heard of before. We've never heard of the small port of Reni, which is along the Danube River, being attacked before by the Russians. And this is the first time ever. And you can see that it's actually fairly down there. It's really at the very edge of Ukrainian territory. We can see that just to the west of Reni, we can see that the country of Moldova begins, and we can see that zoomed out right out here. And then just south of it, the country of Romania then expands through the rest of the plain in this area. And this is something that is just absolutely insane. It's really hard to even comprehend that the Russians would conduct such a dangerous attack on a port that could have been spared regardless, because it doesn't really have that much of a strategic influence on the war, at least at the moment. And so, speaking of escalations, that isn't the only one that the Russians have conducted today. They have also harassed a US MQ-9 Predator drone over Syria and have caused damage to the propeller blades. I'm sorry, it's actually a Reaper drone, but here we can see the Russian fighter jet flew dangerously close to the US aircraft and deployed flares in its path, which struck the propeller. Here we can see the video camera of the MQ-9 taking a look at this Su-27, and we can clearly see the Z mark on the side, and of course, beyond that, it is clearly a Russian aircraft. In this next clip, we're about to see it drop the flares in front of the MQ-9 that ended up causing damage to the propeller. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but once again, an incredibly provocative escalation in between the United States and Russia, or really the Western world as a whole, and Russia itself. And some of y'all may be wondering, why in the world would they want to escalate by these means? These are incredibly severe, and especially considering that damage was caused to a Romanian civilian ship, that is probably the most escalatory act we have ever seen in between Russia and the West so far in this war. Nothing even comes close to it, although nobody was injured or killed in that attack. A Romanian asset was still moderately damaged by that explosion. And it appears that we may actually have an answer that coincides with today's news. As the attacks were happening inside of Ukrainian territory near that Romanian ship, and we also saw the Russian aircraft harassing the MQ-9 over Syria, Putin has passed a new law inside of Russia. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Putin formally signed amendments increasing the retirement age limits of reservists into law on July 24th. Russian sources reported that the Russian State Duma is also planning to change the penalties for draft dodging. And it appears that with this statement and this new law being brought into effect inside of Russia, we're getting a pretty good idea as to what the problem is. Notice that they increased the entire retirement age limits of reservists. That is something that is pretty important because that means that they're trying to make sure that there are going to be more available reservists at any given moment, even if the quality begins to recede due to the increased age of the reservist. Also notice that there are Russian sources reporting that they are planning on changing the penalties for draft dodging to be more severe. This is all an attempt to try and conserve manpower loss over the course of the war and to try and find more available manpower to use through one means or another without freaking out the public with another partial mobilization or mass mobilization because of the war. And this may also be why the Russians are acting so aggressively at this moment with the West. They may be trying to put pressure onto the West, which of course has been trying to avoid an outright conflict with the Russians, to put pressure onto the Ukrainians to try and end this war. And that's why we see that the Su-27 is conducting aggressive actions in Syria, and that's also why we saw the port of Reni being attacked, which is the closest to a NATO country that we've ever seen an attack occur at. And that may also entirely tie back into the Russian manpower shortages. They are running out of manpower. They are trying to scrape the barrel at this point to get any usable manpower they can. And while they are doing that, they are trying to put pressure onto the Western world, so hopefully the war ends before they run out of manpower. We're also hearing that the situation inside of the Black Sea itself is getting very precarious, or more so, incredibly escalatory and serious as well, much like the Danube River attack and also the Su-27 interception we saw over Syria today. Apparently, according to information that Phytox News has been able to receive on Twitter, Britain has information that indicates that the Russian military may start attacks against civilian shipping in the Black Sea, according to Britain's UN envoy. This, of course, is something that we've kind of touched on a little bit earlier, when the Russians made an announcement around 3 to 4 days ago that they would begin to treat ships entering Ukrainian waters as ships carrying military infrastructure or military equipment. That is something that you technically can do during a war. Considering that ships are entering the waters of a nation that is war, they are technically fair game for a country to try and attack and sink, because they could be carrying strategic war materials and other things. However, it does enter another level of complexity when some of those ships may be flying the flags of NATO countries, for example, Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, etc. Those could become some very serious altercations, especially if those ships are attacked and sank. And we could see that NATO begins to seriously consider the idea of armed escorts to Ukrainian ports, or even other escalatory measures as well, considering that the Russians are appearing to go big or go home in an attempt to put as much pressure, maximum pressure as possible onto the Western world, so that way they will hopefully cave and try and end the war, or at least try and force the Ukrainians to end the war, so that way it doesn't escalate into a third world war. Talking about naval infrastructure and things used across large areas of water, the Kirch Bridge appears to not be in that good of shape. Apparently, the Kirch Bridge repairs are a lot more expensive and a lot more worse off than we thought they were. Many people used to say, when this bridge was just attacked about a week ago, that the damage was not that severe and things would not be that bad. It would be on the up and up, and the recovery would only take about a month. It wasn't that bad. It's not even a big attack. The bridge wasn't even knocked out, is what a lot of people, or at least a lot of Russian bots, would like to say. But according to Russian reports on when the construction or reconstruction of the bridge will be completed, that has now been pushed all the way back to December 31st of this year, the very end of the year, meaning that for the next 6 months, the bridge will largely be down, or at least the road segment of it. From what we understand, the attack actually occurred somewhere in this area right here, around this part of the bridge. And from what we can tell, one of the bridge spans, this one facing to the northern side, was knocked completely off of its support beam and is hardly standing above the water, and the other one was also knocked off of its support beam as well. And we may see that there was some significant damage caused to the supporting columns that are holding up the bridge as well. Nevertheless, the initial reports of the bridge being rebuilt within a month have been completely wrong and were in fact a lie by the Russian government. It appears that after they said that the bridge could be rebuilt within a month, they revised that to being November of this year, and now the deadline is going to be the end of the year in December 31st of 2023. This, of course, is going to be causing a little bit of a supply issue for the Russians, considering that the railroad bridge and the road bridge, from what we understand now, were both used by the Russian army to transport supplies into Crimea, of course, to the Crimean forces inside of the peninsula, and also the Russian forces that are in the southern front as well. From what we can understand, that is not going to be as easy or as fruitful as it once has been. Considering that only the railroad bridge is now operational, all supplies that would have crossed over both avenues of the bridge will now all have to cross over the single avenue of the bridge, the railroad bridge, which is the only part of it that is operational. This means that there will likely be a reduction in the supply abilities of the Russian army to be able to conduct forces inside of Crimea and Zaporizhia successfully, and we'll also probably be seeing that the Russians will have to use the land corridor a lot more. Of course, we have all of this mapped out here. The major rail corridors are either marked in green, orange, or red, depending on the availability of supplies traveling through a single given area. And at this moment, Crimea is marked entirely in red due to the limited availability of supplies that will most likely be making their way into the peninsula. The land bridge is also in orange due to the overall amount of traffic that was last recorded over the land bridge, showing that it would most likely be ineffective to supply a large force in the southern front or inside of Crimea for any given period of time. Speaking of serious issues along the land bridge area and then the southern occupied area of Ukraine, we have also heard something that is starting to throw every bit of information that we've gotten about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant onto its head. Apparently, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was never shut down. It has been in a state of hot shutdown. And today, apparently, one of the reactors was once again put into a state of hot shutdown. Some of y'all may be wondering, what is a hot shutdown? We've always heard of a cold shutdown, but never a hot one. A hot one means that the nuclear reactor is actually operating like it would be if it was wanting to produce power, but the voltage and the wattage that it's producing isn't enough for it to be transported onto the grid. And so technically, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, from what we're understanding with this wordage here, and I'll read it off, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been put into a hot shutdown state today by order of the occupation leadership, Energo Atom has said. Such actions are a gross violation of the requirements of the license to operate a nuclear facility, the agency added. Meanwhile, the IAEA said that they found Russian mines at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, but they were in the buffer zone between the internal and external perimeter of the plant. According to the IAEA, during a walkdown on the 23rd of July, the team saw some mines located in a buffer zone between the site's internal and external perimeter barriers. The experts reported that they were situated in a restricted area that operating plant personnel could not access and were facing away from the site. The team did not observe any within the inner site perimeter during the walkdown. Nevertheless, the power plant, according to the wordage here, as of course y'all saw, it doesn't specify a single reactor was put into a hot shutdown. This states that the entire nuclear power plant is in a state of a hot shutdown, meaning that all 6 reactors are online at the moment, but they are not producing enough electricity to go to the main power grid. I don't even think I need to talk about how serious that is, considering that it is in the middle of a war zone, and we constantly see that there are threats and escalations that are revolving around the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant coming from the Russians, or they talk about blowing it up or doing something similar to it. Considering that all the nuclear reactors inside of the power plant are in a state of hot shutdown, this also starts to largely shut down, no pun intended, a lot of the people who wanted to downplay the severity of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and the seriousness of the situation. Many people have been trying to make the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant sound like it's not a serious concern because the power plant is in a state of cold shutdown, meaning if something was to happen to the power plant, it most likely wouldn't cause a large radiological incident. However, with all of the reactors in a state of hot shutdown, a nuclear disaster, the likes of which has never been seen before, Chernobyl wouldn't even be close to it, is now entirely possible due to the reactors being online and actually operating. The rods are inside of the reactors, and if anything was to happen to the power plant, we could see that they begin to melt down. And so, of course, that is all of the breaking news we have today to leave you all on a bit of a large bombshell. I thank you all so much for watching once again, and if y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because it makes us pretty happy to know that folks enjoy the work we do, and also like to constantly see it. We run videos like these every single day of the week, 7 days a week. Sometimes we may not, if there's almost no news coming out anywhere in the world. We also run live streams as well at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, nightly. We are going to be rolling those back. We will not be doing them 6 days a week like we have been. We may end up only doing them about 3 days a week due to the beginning of law school, which is going to start taking up a large amount of our time. And unfortunately, we won't be able to dedicate as much time to the live streams, but we will be able to keep these videos running. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.